Welcome to the congregation of Yahweh. We're here on Shavuot, Feast of Weeks, Feast of Harvest, New Testament. 3 times it's called Pentecost, meaning 50th. Traditionally called the time of the giving of the law, the giving of the Torah. Previously, when discussing the feasts, and when I meditate and study on the feasts, I see a timeline. And no matter how much I meditate on these feasts or read them, I always feel like I'm missing something. I always feel like there's something there that I just can't grasp. And I think the reason that is because these things are going to have confirmation later. There's a lot of books saying, well, this is the way it is, this is what this means. And until it actually happens, I don't think we'll know for sure. But we can meditate on these things and feed on them, and we know, we're seeing in a glass dimly, we know that they are the plan of salvation. But recently I'm starting to see that there's separate stories inside of the feast. And to tell you, something similar, just like the zodiac has 12 signs, and each of the 12 signs has 3 different stories inside of each compartment. Just an analogy. But the feasts, 7 feasts, have 7 different stories. And I think some of these things are going to, in the future, they're going to connect and overlap each other. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. For instance, there's a pattern going on here. 6 days work shall be done, the 7th is a Sabbath. I think there's a story there. I believe that we're going to labor and toil for 6 of Yahweh's days. We're waiting for that 7th day when we will rest. Rest from what? Rest from our labors. Rest from Satan. Satan shall be bound for 1,000 years. The land will have its rest. From the setting apart of the lamb on the 10th day, Passover, to atonement, 7 months. And I think there's a connection, there's a story there. From the setting apart of that lamb to being at one with Yahweh, that's a story. That's a completion going on there. After the Passover, there's 7 days of unleavened bread, of matzah. There's a story there. In the Messianic or New Testament scriptures, we see that leaven symbolizes hypocrisy, false doctrine, and sin, rebellion. And I believe there's a 7-day plan going on. It's Yahweh's plan. It's going to take 7 days to complete it, His days. From the wave sheaf to Pentecost, 7 weeks, 7 Sabbaths. The wave sheaf is a first fruit, and the 2 loaves are a first fruit. One doesn't have leaven, one does. And I think that that's an identifying mark as to who those first fruits are, which we know those things. On the first day of the 7th month, we have trumpets. Revelation says there's 7 trumpets. We're waiting for the last trump. On the 10th day, we have Yom Kippur in the 7th month. And then on the 15th day, we have tabernacles, booths. We do that for 7 days. He said that they'll dwell in booths for 7 days to remember that they were strangers in a foreign land and were in temporary dwellings. Right now, that's a story. Mankind is in temporary tabernacles. Paul says that I have this earthly tabernacle. I'm waiting to be clothed with my heavenly tabernacle. Right after that 7-day plan is a 8th day, the last great day. It's the conclusion of the story. You come outside of your tabernacle, hallelujah, and you have a big feast. But the backdrop behind all these stories are harvests, directly corresponding to what's going on in the stories, in the rehearsals. I want to go through just a few scriptures that would draw our minds to the harvests behind the feasts in Matthew chapter 9. Matthew chapter 9, starting in verse 36. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. When we hear the words of our Savior and we see these things written in the New Testament, these things bring us back to things that have already been written. Look up scattered. Look up the shepherd. And it takes us straight back to prophecy. But continuing on, then saith he unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray you therefore the master of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. He's looking upon a scattered people that don't have a shepherd. They don't have anyone leading them the right way, leading them to the water. And he says, this is the harvest. Flip over to Matthew 13, starting in verse 18. Hear ye therefore the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and understands it not, then comes the wicked one, and catches away that which was sown in his heart. This is he which receives seed by the wayside. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but we end up finding that the sower is the Son of Man, and the seed is the Word. And I believe that all these harvests that are going on are started with a seed, and I believe that seed is the Word. And the fruit that comes from that seed is the Word manifesting itself on the outside. The reason the Messiah was the Word made flesh is because the Word was in him, and that's all he did was the Word. He walked the Word. He spoke the Word. That was the fruit coming from the seed. But I want to continue on. We see that the seed, the word that was put in these different soils, some didn't bear fruit, and then some did bear fruit. Some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. And then I want to start in verse 24. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. We know what the good seed is. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the household came and said unto him, Sir, did not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? And he said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while you gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, Gather you together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds. But when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. One thing that this reminds me of is the tree back there in Daniel, the worldly kingdom, how all the beasts of the field came and lodged, but that tree was cut down. But this obviously refers to, it seems to relate to the Messiah here, being the least. He that is servant is the greatest. Anyway, continue on in Revelation chapter 14. Another hint as to the harvest. Starting in verse 12, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of Elohim and the faith of Yeshua. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Right blessed are the dead which die in the Master from henceforth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle, and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of Elohim. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse's bridle, by a space of 1,600 furlongs. Another reference to harvesting. All these things point to the harvest of mankind, a harvest of Yahweh's creation. I want to flip back to Leviticus chapter 23. Starting in verse 1. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feasts of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. A lot of people interpret that different ways. I think everything he says after that is under that title. These are my feasts. And he goes on to talk about them. But continue on, 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest. A holy convocation, you shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of Yahweh in all your dwellings. These are the feasts of Yahweh, even holy convocations which you shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month between the evenings is Yahweh's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein, but you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh 7 days. And the seventh day is a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you be come into the land which I give you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. Now, with leaven, spiritual leaven in mind, and this being without leaven, I pulled out a few verses. I'm going to read Matthew chapter 1. In verse 23, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is El with us. This woman was a virgin, so this son was the firstborn. There's a very close relation between firstborn and first fruit. And they shall, and then Joseph, being raised from sleep, did as the angel of Yahweh had bidden him, and took unto him his wife, and knew her not till she had brought forth her firstborn son. Firstborn belongs to Yahweh. First fruit belongs to Yahweh. Hebrews chapter 1. I'm going to do quite a bit of flipping if I'll just read it. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 6. And again, when he bringeth the firstborn into the world, he says, and let all the angels of Yahweh worship him. The firstborn into the world. Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1, starting in verse 12. Giving thanks unto the Father which had made us meet to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light, who hath delivered us from the power of darkness, and has translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins, who is the image of the invisible Elohim, the firstborn of all creation. For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the assembly, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, another firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. Revelations chapter 1. Starting verse 4. John, to the seven assemblies which are in Asia, grace be unto you and peace from Yahweh, which is, and which was, and which is to come, and from the seven spirits which are before his throne, and from Yeshua the Messiah, who is the faithful witness, and the firstborn of the dead, and the prince of the kings of the earth, unto him that loved us and washed us from our sins in his own blood, and hath made us kings and priests unto Elohim and his Father. To him be honor and dominion forever and ever. Romans chapter 8. Verse 28, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love Elohim, to them who are the called according to his purpose, for whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. And 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Verse 16, for if the dead rise not, then is not the Messiah raised, and if the Messiah is not raised, your faith is vain, you are yet in your sins. Then they which are fallen asleep in the Messiah are perished. If in this life only we have hope in the Messiah, we are of all men most miserable. But now is the Messiah risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in the Messiah shall all be made alive. But every man in his own order, the Messiah the first fruits, afterwards they that are the Messiahs at his coming. Then comes the end. I'm going to continue on from there. And Revelations says he is the first and the last. I'm going to flip back to Jeremiah chapter 2. starting in verse 1. Moreover, the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Go and cry in the ears of Jerusalem, saying, Thus saith Yahweh, I remember thee, the kindness of thy youth, the love of thine espousals, when thou went after me in the wilderness, in a land that was not sown. Israel was holiness unto Yahweh, and the first fruits of his increase. All that devour him shall offend, evil shall come upon them, saith Yahweh. Romans 8:23. Let me back it up to 20. For the creation was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who hath subjected the same in hope, because the creation itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the magnificent liberty of the children of Elohim. For we know that the whole creation groans and travails in pain together until now. And not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, that is, the redemption of our body. Pointing out that we have the first fruits of the Spirit leads us to believe that there's going to be a great harvest of the Spirit. In Romans 11:16, for if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy, and if the root be holy, so are the branches. James 1:18. Of his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that seed, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Revelations 14, and I'll be done flipping for a minute. Revelations 14 and I'll start from the beginning. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion. Recently I talked about that mountain and going back to the mountain. Messiah returning to the mountain, drawing his people to the mountain, and the word will go forth from Zion, and the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. And with him 144,000, having his name and his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sang as it were a new song before the throne, and before the four beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Paul said that he had espoused the church, the assembly, as a chaste virgin, which would make more sense in this context. These are they which follow the Lamb wheresoever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto Elohim and to the Lamb. Now, I believe that with the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, these things directly relate to time periods. I can't put my finger on it, and I don't want to etch it in stone. But it would seem that the Messiah was the first fruits of the barley harvest, and these are the first fruits of the wheat harvest. And a couple of significant things about the barley being a weaker plant, and the wheat being a stronger plant, and the wheat is taller than the barley. But I believe there's going to be a massive harvest during the millennial reign, and it's going to be so great because Satan will be bound for 1,000 years. I think that's also the time of the great harvest, a massive outpouring of the Spirit, because Satan will be bound. I don't know. That's just something to look forward to. So it says here that these 144,000 were also first fruits unto Elohim and unto the Lamb. I'm going to go back to Leviticus chapter 23. Okay, we left off with the wave sheaf. Verse 9, and Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath the priest shall wave it. And you shall offer that day, when you wave the sheaf, a he-lamb without blemish of the first year for a burnt offering unto Yahweh. And the meal offering thereof shall be 2/10 deals of fine flour mingled with oil, an offering made by fire unto Yahweh for a sweet savor. And the drink offering thereof shall be of wine, the fourth part of a hin. And you shall eat neither bread, nor parched corn, nor green ears, until the self same day that you have brought an offering unto your Elohim. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. And you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days. And you shall offer a new meal offering unto Yahweh. And you shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves of 2/10 deals. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are first fruits unto Yahweh. Now this is just kind of theoretical. Those 144,000, it says that they are first fruits unto Yahweh. And I believe that there's a time period going on over there, but is it possible that those 2 loaves are the 2 olive trees, the 2 flocks, the 2 nations under one head? Those 2 loaves are still one offering, one first fruit. I don't know, something to ponder there. Then, 18, and you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs without blemish of the first year, and 1 young bullock and 2 rams. They shall be for a burnt offering unto Yahweh, with their meal offering and their drink offerings, even offering made by fire of sweet savor unto Yahweh. Then you shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering, and 2 lambs of the first year for a sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits for a wave offering before Yahweh with the 2 lambs. They shall be holy to Yahweh for the priest. And you shall proclaim on the selfsame day that it be a holy convocation unto you. You shall do no servile work therein, a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. So that's why we're here today, a holy convocation on this 50th day after the 49, the 7 Sabbaths. I'm going to flip over to Acts chapter 2. And this would tells us that it happened on the day of Pentecost, and possibly why they were gathered together. They were having a convocation. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, and suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together, and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? Now, several things to take note of here. You've got a Spirit being poured out on a group of believers that are together at Pentecost. This is the Spirit of truth. And the truth, what does He do? He draws us to the truth. The truth is the Word. But if we go back to another day on Pentecost, traditionally Shavuot was called the time of the giving of the law. At Sinai, the people sanctified themselves, prepared themselves for the presence of Yahweh. They washed their clothes. They didn't come near their wives. And His presence came down. His word was spoken. I think these two things go together, and it points forward to our King and Redeemer coming down to the mountain, the massive outpouring of the Spirit, the massive harvest, the harvest of the Spirit. People actually understanding, hearing this new language. Mankind coming back together, the opposite of what happened at the Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel, worldly kingdom wanted to come together and be great and make a name for themselves. But that wasn't Yahweh's will. He wanted His word, His people to go out and subdue the earth. He wanted His name to be known across the face of the earth. But it says, how is it that we hear every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? Parthians and Medians, Elamites, and the dwellers in Mesopotamia, and in Judea, and Cappadocia, and Pontus, and Asia, Persia, Pamphylia, Egypt. Names all these different regions. And it says that they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, What meaneth this? Others mocking said, These men are full of new wine. But Peter, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, You men of Judea, and all you that dwell at Jerusalem, be this known unto you, and hearken to my words. For these are not drunken as you suppose, seeing it is but the third hour of the day. But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel, and it shall come to pass in the last days. Now, I don't believe he's saying this completely fulfills this. I think this is scratching the surface of what's actually going to happen. But he says, It shall come to pass in the last days, saith Elohim, I will pour out of my Spirit upon all flesh. I think we're still looking forward to some of that. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And on my servants and on my handmaids I will pour out in those days of my Spirit, and they shall prophesy. Now, that's amazing. He's going to pour out His Spirit on His servants, but He's also going to pour out His Spirit on all flesh. Imagine that. Every servant having the Spirit and all flesh having the Spirit. That sounds like something coming together to me. That sounds like a massive harvest. But continuing on, and I will show wonders in heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smokes. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and notable day of Yahweh come. Now, there's some stuff going on out there about blood red moon tetrads and eclipses and stuff coming up soon. That might be something to take note of, to keep your eye on, because if the scriptures say that the sun will be darkened and the moon is going to be turned to blood, and through calculations they can prove that these things are coming to pass in the next few years, that's just something to keep your eye on. And things that have never happened before, mind you. And they happen around events going on with Israel. They happen close to feast days. That's pretty amazing. Things that's never happened before are about to fall on feast days, or close to feast days. I'm not the astronomer, but we can turn to the professionals for that. But continuing on, and it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of Yahweh shall be saved. You men of Israel, hear these words, Yeshua of Nazareth, a man approved of Elohim among you by miracles, wonders, and signs, which Elohim did by him in the midst of you, as you yourselves also know. Him being delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of Elohim, you have taken, and by wicked hands have impaled and slain. Now, one more thing here. You've got a group of believers who walked with the Messiah. They walked, as John said, they saw the Word. They touched the Word. They put their hands on, he called him the Word. Revelation says when he comes back, he is the Word. I saw the Word coming from the heavens. Now, do we see a connection here? The Word at Sinai, the Spirit of truth at Pentecost, which puts the Word inside of you, and that Word's coming back. That Word is coming back with a massive outpouring of the Spirit on all mankind. And that is when the law shall go forth from Zion and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. But we're just getting a glimpse. We are just getting a glimpse. But that's all I have for today. Let's just thank Yahweh for His plan of salvation. Let's continue to meditate on these things and keep our eyes open. Yahweh bless.